Dr. Anthony Harper here, blessed to be at CPAC with Josh Hammer of Newsweek. And thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And we have some similar concerns about Israel. So what are the top concerns you have about what's been going on, with the rise of antisemitism, what the Biden administration is doing, how they're handling this war, and all the pressure they're putting on Israel?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start. My panel today is on campus anti-Semitism. I'm on a panel discussing the harrowing, atrocious, and evil rise of Jew hatred on campuses since October 7th. I actually have some firsthand experience. I was speaking at the University of Michigan for a talk on the conflict in Gaza back in November. And you had probably about 25, 30 or so pro-Palestinian protesters who physically shouted me down. It was a whole harrowing affair. You see the evil in these people's eyes. It's really quite harrowing. This issue is very close to me. I was in Israel about a month and a half ago. I went down to the Gaza envelope. We went to Kfar Aza. We went to Reim, which is where the music festival was, Ofakim. We went all around there. So I saw it with myself. You're dealing here with a level of evil that is very difficult to describe unless you've seen it in person. It's bone chilling. It is chilling to the core. What happened there on October 7th, to say it's Nazi-esque is bordering on understating it. What the Nazis did, and I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, so obviously I have distant relatives killed in the Holocaust. Thank God, not close relatives. But if anything, what happened in the forests and the mass shootings in the gas chambers in Poland and Eastern Europe pales in comparison to some of the levels of brutality that Hamas unleashed to the world on October 7th. And when you have an administration in the Biden administration that doesn't see that, it doesn't see how stark the dichotomy is here between one of our closest allies when it comes to defense sharing, intelligence sharing. We have the same enemies. The U.S. had 3 soldiers just killed at Tower 22, the military base in Jordan. Who was it killed by? Well, it was killed by an Iranian proxy militia operating out of Iraq, but funded by the Iranians. Who else do the Iranians fund? Hezbollah and Hamas. The U.S. and Israel are aligned. We are in sync. We are fighting the exact same enemies. And when you have this current administration that is constantly saying that Israel is going over the top in Gaza, what is wrong with you? At Newsweek, where I work, we had a great op-ed published recently from a guy named John Spencer. John Spencer is the head of the Urban Warfare Studies Department at West Point. And he's been the chair of that for about a decade now. And he wrote a wonderful op-ed saying that there is no precedent in all of the history of warfare for the urban combat, the door-to-door combat that the IDF has been doing in Gaza for the past 3 to 4 months or so. And moreover, no military, so says John Spencer, the esteemed chair at West Point, no military has been doing more to ensure that civilians are not killed, to go above and beyond, way past what the international laws of war dictates, than the IDF. John Spencer served 2 tours in Iraq. He was there in 2016 when the U.S. Army was fighting against ISIS in Mosul. He says the U.S. Army didn't even do what the IDF is doing. So the fact that people in power don't see this, the fact that the Biden administration is currently being led by domestic political concerns about the Arab or Muslim American vote in Dearborn, Michigan or Minneapolis, they're letting that dictate their policy when it comes to one of our closest allies fighting an existential fight against Hamas and increasingly Hezbollah up north. It's really just disgusting. It's a very personal issue for me, like I said. My wife is Israeli. She's actually in Israel right now as I'm speaking to you. I dropped her off at the airport yesterday. She's there right now. She comes from an Israeli family. I was just there a month and a half ago. It's appalling stuff from the American Biden administration. It's tragic.
I was just reading recently something about the sadistic behavior of Hamas and the way they treated the Jewish people.
Yeah, it's like I said. To call it Nazi-esque is bordering on understating it. You're talking about babies being put into ovens, heated all the way up. You're talking about it's hard to even say this stuff. Like taking sharp knives, putting them in women's genitalia, and goring them from the inside out, killing Holocaust survivors execution style, taking little 1-2-year-old babies hostage. It's not human behavior. And these terrorists, the Hamas gave them drugs. They gave them drugs before they did it. They try to basically zap them out of any kind of barely functioning human mentality. It's stuff that everyone around the world with anything remotely resembling a conscience, who has more than one brain cell between the ears, should immediately look at and say, this is unequivocally, unabashedly wrong, and we are going to back to the hilt the guys who are currently fighting it. Unfortunately, like I said, there are domestic political concerns, and then there is the inescapable fact that Jew hatred is not only the oldest bigotry in the world, but it is also currently the most fashionable form of bigotry in the world.
I think also the hot issue about, we've had Black Lives Matter, but now we have Palestinian Lives Matter, and how BLM has morphed into PLM.
Correct.
Become more violent. Here in Washington, D.C., a defacing of the Lincoln Memorial. There's a lot of similarities to Palestinian Lives Matter efforts. So what are your comments about Palestinian Lives Matter?
It's the same people. I mean, they were out there for the Women's March back in January 2017 after Donald Trump became president. They were there in the summer of 2020 in the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots, burning down cities, vandalizing properties, barely paying anything when it comes to the cost of those crimes. And now they're out now for Hamas. And it's the cause of the day. I mean, this is how the left operates. This is how critical race theory, how intersectionality, how identity politics at this level operates, where you have a worldview, and let's not mince words, it is an evil worldview, not just a wrong, but an evil worldview that arbitrarily divides all of humanity into oppressors and the oppressed. You're strong or you're weak, you're white or you're brown, you're colonizer or colonized, whatever, you fill in your buzzword of the day. When you have a worldview like that, it's easy to sub in the Women's March or Black Lives Matter, whatever happens to be. And you know, the other thing going on here, I think, you know, declining church attendance in America, these people who are less religious, they need a cause. They need a cause to make them feel like, because humans yearn for meaning. So if you don't have God in your life, the secularization of society, you need some sort of cause to fill that urge. I think that was partially what was going on with Black Lives Matter, and that's partially what's going on now with this utter nonsense in the streets for Hamas.
It is troubling on several fronts about this rise of anti-Semitism worldwide and very serious behavior. So what issues are you addressing here at CPAC?
So my panel, which is with Brooke Goldstein of the Lawfare Project, wonderful organization, as well as a college student named Ephraim Shalanov from California, we are talking about the rise of anti-Semitism on campus since October 7th, which, you know, as I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, I saw firsthand at the University of Michigan when I was giving my talk back in November, I've seen it with my own eyes there. It's the worst it's ever been in modern American history there, and tragically, I don't think it's going away anytime soon, because you're dealing here not just with a bunch of bad apples, you're dealing with a ruinous, toxic, and cancerous ideology that has spread all throughout American higher education, that frankly has spread a lot more than that. It's now spread to the corporate boardroom, this woke ideology, again, that has the whole oppressors oppressed thing. And it's really bad. And, you know, again, as a recently married Jewish man myself, who God willing will have children in the not so distant future, it really does make us start thinking about where our kids will go to college, if at all. I'm kind of hoping, frankly, that they won't even need to go to college, but because college will be so discredited by then by all the nonsense going on. But we'll see what happens, 18, 19, whatever years from now.
Okay. Well, some other issues regarding anti-Semitism with the Biden administration pressuring Israel, this two-state idea. What is your comment about the Knesset recently voted 9-11 to directly oppose any two-state idea?
Yeah, it's such a wrong idea, again, that it's bordering on not just wrong but evil. The idea of an independent Palestinian state, you know, Jordan was the Palestinian state. To go back here on the history of international law, after the European powers, namely Britain and France, were victorious over the Ottoman Empire and the other people, Germany, of course, Bulgaria, when it came to World War I, and they carved up the Middle East. Under the British mandate for Palestine, you had Mandatory Palestine, which was the name of the land of Israel, which included, well, today we call it Israel, and also included the so-called West Bank. And then you had the Emirate of Transjordan, which today is Jordan. That was the Palestinian state. That was the original two-state solution, was Israel and Jordan, where the so-called West Bank, what we Jews call Judea and Samaria, that's the biblical heartland, that was part of Israel. It's still part of Israel under international law, under uti possidetis juris, which is a principle of international law that basically says when a new entity is formed, it inherits the borders of the pre-existing entity. Therefore, when David Ben-Gurion declares Israel's independence in May 1948, Israel immediately inherited the borders of Mandatory Palestine, which again included the so-called West Bank. I'd go on about that. The reason, again, why the Biden administration is pushing for this wrong-headed, bordering on outright evil policy, this creation of a so-called Palestinian state, this rewarding of the very butchers, of the very Nazi-esque war criminals from October 7th to give them a new state. It has nothing to do with rightness and wrongness. It has nothing to do with justice, virtue, ethical considerations, anything like that. It has exclusively to do with the fact that Biden and the Democrats are worried out of their mind that their Jew-hating, anti-Semitic, rabidly leftist, woke intersectional base with a lot of Arabs and Muslims as well is not going to get out and vote for them. And they better start appeasing them now, and if it means throwing the Jews under the bus, so be it.
You know that for evangelical Christians is a big issue about Jewish scripture that relates to this two-state idea. So you're familiar with Joel 3:2, the Jewish prophet Joel. It talks about God being angry about people that scatter his people and divide up his land. And the Biden administration doesn't seem to care about the Jewish sacred scriptures.
I mean, it's also right there in Genesis. I mean, what we Jews call Bereshit. I mean, that God will bless those who bless the nation of Israel. I'm Israel, right? So, I mean, this is all throughout Scripture. But again, you're dealing with people who they're not reading the Bible. That's not what forms their worldview.
So you really don't believe that Biden is a good Catholic then?
The guy who's a rabidly pro-abortion president, no, I would say that he is probably not a good Catholic, despite the media's attempts to bamboozle you and convince you to the contrary.
Okay, it seems to be a lot of hypocrisy issues to deal with in the Biden administration. Have you been to the White House before?
During the Trump administration, not since then.
Okay. So the Trump administration was a lot different. Up to that point, you're familiar with that peace plan that he was working on with Jared Kushner. Did you see that map?
Yes.
That shows the division of Israel?
Yes.
So it seemed like to be going all south for him politically after he released this map dividing Israel. Did you see a correlation?
Trump or Netanyahu?
Actually, for Trump specifically, and maybe Netanyahu. I had a meeting with Michelle Bachmann about this matter. But
okay. Yeah, I remember the plan very well. It was released in late January 2020, the so-called Vision for Peace. I was not a particularly big fan of it. I mean, was it better than the previous so-called two-state solutions? I mean, the one with Ehud Barak, the Bill Clinton. Yeah, I mean, it was better than the previous two-state offers. But they're still creating a fairly autonomous so-called Palestinian entity. I was not a fan of that. And many on the right in Israel rejected it. You know, Likud, Netanyahu's party, was divided over it, but all the parties basically to the right of Likud opposed it, and I thought that they were correct to oppose it. It was not a good plan. I was disappointed to see two people that are obviously very supportive of Israel, Trump and Netanyahu, go ahead and support this plan, and I would oppose it again if it came up in the future.
Okay, so the Biden administration is so dead set on this two-state idea, almost deluded, I think, to that issue. So I'm wondering if I'm curious about what President Trump is going to be doing as far as changing his opinion on this whole two-state idea after he was so gung-ho about with the map and everything.
Look, Donald Trump is a transactional politician. His background is in real estate deals, golf course transactions, things like that. You know, there are not a ton of issues where Trump is a true conviction politician, where he has deeply held ideological fervor. There are a couple of issues. He is very hawkish on China. He is a big trade protectionist, big proponent of trade restrictionism and tariffs. Those are really the two worldview items I think he's been remarkably consistent on for a long time. Other than that, I just don't think he holds like deeply held principles. Now he was the most pro-Israel president in the history of Israel, no doubt about that, without question. Period. Full stop. End of story. But I don't think that was necessarily coming from a place of deep conviction. There were other things that led him to that. That doesn't diminish how grateful I or you or any other supporter of Israel should be for his remarkable, truly remarkable, transformative, dynamic policies. I'm just saying I don't think it was coming from a place of deep ideology. It fit into the broader puzzle, the broader worldview better. He had advisors telling him to do this or that there. So I think I worry that he could potentially be malleable when it comes to a so-called two-state solution if we get a second term there. But I know that he's definitely a lot safer than the other guy when it comes to that issue. That's for sure.
Well, you seem to be doing really
well.
I
need to wrap this up. Yeah, because I have a panel in like less than an hour now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me,
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Josh, and a very serious issue to deal with here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll finish it here.